Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So in between the various chanters, I will be reading and commenting on Sri Ishopanishad. There are 108 Upanishads compiled by Srila Vyasadeva. And our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, translated the Ishopanishad or Ishopanishad. And I found verse number 11 to be very, very significant, especially for the youth. So, no matter what, because we're going to do little by little. So it's going to be very instructive, not just for the youth, but for everyone. So verse number 11 is translated, only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So let me explain this verse in my own words. So the first point, there are two types of knowledge according to the Vedas. There is material knowledge, which according to Ishopanishad is actually considered nescience or ignorance. And then the other path of knowledge is transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge deals with God and the soul and their relation. Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. According to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the founder of the Krishna consciousness movement, he says that you take all the Vedas, all the Puranas, Itihasas, the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Mahabharata, Ramayana, you take all the Vedic scriptures, they're only teaching three things: Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. Sambandha, that we have an eternal relationship with God. Eternal means it always was there, it's there now, it'll be there in the future. Just like this is your son. All right. That relationship is fixed. Cannot be undone, can it? Even when he has his children, your relationship as mother and son remains. Our relationship with God, Krishna, is in the same way. Difference is, your son was born on a certain date. But we, according to Bhagavad Gita, were never born. Right? We were never born. Ajo nitya sasvatam purano. So that means our relationship with Krishna has always been there. It's there now. It'll be there in the future. The only difference is some people recognize it, other people neglect it or deny it or reject it. You are different. Otherwise, you would not be here tonight. You recognize, I have an eternal relationship with God. So, Sambandha, that's the first thing. Recognizing and understanding from all angles of vision that we have an eternal relationship with God, and that relationship is based on service. Talk is cheap. Husband and wife may say, I love you, But when it comes time to making chapatis, go make them yourself. That doesn't mean there's any love there. Love means service. That is the demonstration of love. I do something to please the other party. That's how so this idea of bhakti, devotional service, is how we demonstrate our love for God. It's good, don't get me wrong, it's good to say I love God. That's better than saying I reject Him or I don't believe He exists. But besides just acknowledging it, there's a way to show it or demonstrate it, and that's called bhakti, the 9 processes. You're doing now the first one, Shravanam, hearing. And according to Srimad Bhagavatam, because you are hearing the message of the Sri Ishopanishad, Krishna in your heart is blessing you right now. Ashirvad from Krishna right now, because you have agreed to listen. Unless you're on your cell phone, then you're only half listening. Okay, Sambandha. You have an eternal relationship with God. Then Abhideya, the next level that the Vedas are teaching, is that there are activities, there is a process by which you demonstrate your eternal relationship with God. And that's dictated by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. The Guru teaches you how to serve Krishna based on the scriptures. I cannot make up my own service. Doesn't work that way. God is the Almighty. So He has already designated how He wants to be served. So Abhideya means I am demonstrating according to the rules of the scriptures how to act in this way of I am the eternal servant. Just like if you have a government post, you have to follow the rituals, the regulations. Many years ago, I was doing a program, and many of the people in the program had high positions with Microsoft. It was in Seattle. So I was dealing with VPs and that level in the audience. And they told me, they showed me, here's the Shastra if you want to work for Microsoft. So, can't do this, you must wear this, you must do... It was like this big. I was going, oh my God. Compared to the Vedic scriptures, that's nothing. Prabhupada said just 4 regulative principles, chant 16 rounds. To work for Microsoft, you have to follow all these codes. I was stunned. So Abhideya. Then the intelligent question is, okay, you have told me that I have an eternal relationship with God based on service, and then I should act according to this prescribed method. What's in it for me? What do I get out of it? And that's when the third tract comes in, prayojana, love. Real love for God is developed by following this Abhideya. And Lord Chaitanya kindly points out that this love of God is already there, dormant in everyone's heart. There are no exceptions. Since the soul is part and parcel of Krishna, then love of God is already there in everyone. It's just lying dormant. And the process of Abhideya awakens it. Just as the match has the ability to turn into fire, but you have to strike it. If the match didn't have the ability, say you do an ordinary stick, you can do it 1,000,000 times, it's not going to become a flame. But because the match has the potency, So similarly, every living entity has the potency to develop love of God. It's not something extraneous. It's not something foreign. It's already there in everyone's heart. So therefore, this verse was saying, one who learns the process of nescience, meaning, yes, because we live in a material world, you have to learn nescience. You have to learn material things. You can't avoid it. So yes, that's why I'm saying this tonight's classes is especially for the youth. Because that's what you've just spent in high school and college. Learning the process of nescience. Under the name of chemistry, biology, computerology. According to Ishopanishad, you've learned all these years nescience, ignorance. But you're in the material world, can't avoid it. You have to learn these things. So one who can learn the process of nescience, meaning material knowledge, and that of transcendental knowledge side by side. So that is the benefit that you have had by coming to Namahat programs, going to the temple. All throughout your childhood, you have been learning alongside nescience. You have been learning transcendental knowledge by the programs, by your personal study, by going to the temple, by attending different various spiritual programs. You have somehow or other learned transcendental knowledge. So that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing according to Ishopanishad. We're not denying that you have to learn material education. As it says here, you learn the process of nescience and transcendental knowledge side by side. What happens then? Now you're able to transcend the influence of repeated birth and death, samsara. If you just learn the process of nescience and not transcendental knowledge, guaranteed samsara. Guaranteed. That's a given. You will have to take birth again. But if throughout your life you have also learned transcendental knowledge, you should be able to transcend. Basically, we say we transcend by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then it says, not only will you transcend repeated birth and death, samsara, but you will enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Immortality means the spiritual realm, the spiritual kingdom that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, where there is no need of sunlight, moonlight, or electricity. There's sunlight and moonlight, but there's no need of it. But don't worry, it's there. Otherwise, how he's going to do the rasa dance? Krishna doesn't do the rasa dance in the midday sun. So even in the kingdom of God, there is sun and moonlight, morning, day. But the verse meaning is there's no need. We need here in the material realm, we need sun, moon, electricity. Well, otherwise we can't function because the material universe by nature is dark. But not in the spiritual realm. Everything is self-luminous. So what are the full blessings of immortality? What does that mean? Full blessings of immortality. Well, number one, no more death. This will be, hopefully, your last death experience. This will be the last one. Then you will have full knowledge. What is full knowledge? I'm the eternal servant of Krishna, and I will know what is my eternal service for Krishna. Just like we see here, the various Ashtasakis, they each have an eternal service with Krishna. They don't do the same thing. Each one is doing, so all of us, each and every one of us, has an eternal service with Krishna. So that's part of the full blessings of immortality. You will experience every moment what is your eternal relationship with Krishna. And then the last thing, bliss. Happiness that increases and increases at every moment. We all know here in America, anywhere in the world, the happiness is up and down, like the stock market, up and down. We're happy sometimes, then all of a sudden we get a phone call. Oh my God. Everything comes crashing down. Happens to everyone. Nobody's immune. Everything is going great, and then all of a sudden you're fired. What? Now I'm boom. Or I get a disease, or whatever it is. So it's like that, material, but not in the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God, your happiness at every moment. Pratipadang purnamrita swadanam. Your happiness increases at every moment, and it does not come down. We can't even imagine this. It's impossible. We're not used to it. That at every moment, my pleasure is increasing and it can't come down. That's why we're pursuing this path. Everybody chant the Maha Mantra. So in between the different chanters, we are hearing from the 11th verse of Sri Ishopanishad. Sri Ishopanishad is a very good book to read before trying to read Bhagavad Gita. For some people, reading Bhagavad Gita may be a little difficult. Like in my case, I liked Krishna book, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it took me 20 years before I could appreciate Bhagavad Gita. I always found it I couldn't get it. Krishna book, oh, fantastic. Bhagavatam, ooh, lovely. Chaitanya Charitamrita, nectar. Bhagavad Gita, Then later, as I got purified, one day I said, you know what? Prabhupada says Bhagavad Gita is the foundation. So I forced myself. You're going to have to read it thoroughly. And once I surrendered, now I have to read it every year. That's how good, but it took a while. So I've been reading Ishopanishad this week, and I see that this is perfect before reading Bhagavad Gita. It's like a Bhagavad Gita primer, because you'll see as we go through Prabhupada's purport, he explains it through the verses of Bhagavad Gita. And if you notice, if you read Prabhupada's books carefully, all the time when he's making his purports, he's quoting Bhagavad Gita, because it's the foundation. So our next chanter will be Batuk. So I'm going to speak a few minutes, and then you be ready with the microphone. You're a favorite. You had been, everybody wants you. Right? Am I right? Yes. Okay. So so first the verse. This is the verse, the translation to the 11th shloka of Ishopanishad. Ishopanishad has 19 verses. Very short book. One who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Purport by our loving spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada begins. Actually, Prabhupada wrote and commented on most of the verses even before coming to America. It appeared in his Back to Godhead magazines before coming, so it's very old. So you get vintage Prabhupada when you read this Ishopanishad. Vintage. Like in the musicians, they like the vintage instruments because back in the day, instruments were made better. Nowadays, everything's mass-produced, Chinese, this. But if you get a vintage guitar, some of them can go for like $100,000. Or like a violin, same way, Stradivarius. Or a vintage art collection. Not wine. We're not going to go there because we're devotees. So this is vintage Prabhupada. Since the creation of the material world, everyone has been trying to attain a permanent life. But those laws of nature are so cruel that no one has been able to avoid the hand of death. No one wants to die, nor does anyone want to become old or diseased. The law of nature, however, does not allow anyone immunity from old age, disease, or death. Nor has the advancement of material knowledge solved these problems. Material science can discover the nuclear bomb to accelerate the process of death, but material science cannot discover anything that can protect man from the cruel hands of old age, disease, and death. So immediately we're reminded several verses in the Bhagavad Gita. Mrityu sarvaharas chaham. Prabhupada used to say, that line in Bhagavad Gita is for the atheist. The atheist says, there is no God, I don't believe in God. Prabhupada says, that Krishna will visit him at the time of death and take everything away. You don't believe in God? That's all right. You'll come visit you. It's coming at the moment of death, when everything is taken. And then, of course, this paragraph, that verse in the 13th chapter, the 4 inherent miseries. Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. We're all experience. Birth, you ladies, you know, you gave birth to your children, was a walk in the park? Huh? I don't know. That you have to ask for yourself. How was the birth experience? Anybody like getting old? Who likes getting old? Disease? Who likes disease? Okay, here it is. I got the new disease. Who wants it? Nobody wants disease. And death. Now Prabhupada preaches. From the Puranas, we learn of the activities of Hiranyakashipu, a king who was very much advanced materially, wanting to conquer the cruel death by his material acquisitions and the strength of his nescience. Earlier I explained, what is nescience? Material knowledge. According to Ishopanishad, material knowledge is actually ignorance under the guise of knowledge. That's how because there's previous verses that it goes into detail how materialistic knowledge is actually ignorance. But I'm not going to go to UCLA and tell them, you guys are all teaching. They'll lock me up. But Ishopanishad says, what you're teaching, Mr. University, is all nescience, ignorance. Hiranyakashipu underwent a severe type of meditation, so severe that the inhabitants of all the planetary systems became disturbed by his mystic powers. They all went to the demigods. This was the original global warming. I know the Republicans deny it, but it's in the Shastras. When Hiranyakashipu was doing his austerities, the whole universe became so hot. The demigod said, do something. It's getting too... And they were in heaven. It got too hot there. So global warming exists. I also did a Facebook thing today. It's here. I'm going to point out another example of global warming. It's a fact. And there's a reason behind it. So all the demigods went to Lord Brahma. It's getting so hot in here. Stop this Hiranyakashipu, because from his head was coming a fire by his severe austerities. So all the inhabitants of the planetary systems became disturbed. Hiranyakashipu forced the creator of this universe, the demigod Brahma, to come down to him. Hiranyakashipu then asked Brahma for the benediction of becoming Amara, by which one does not die. Brahma said that he could not award that benediction because even he himself, the material creator who rules all the planets, himself was not Amara. Now, usually in the Vedas, the demigods are dressed as Amara. This is why this is significant. Generally, you'll read in the Vedic scriptures, the demigods are called Amara, but not really. When the Vedas say the demigods are Amara, it means they don't die like human beings die. But they die because Brahma told Hiranyakashipu, I can't give you something I myself don't have. It's like sometimes we go to a friend. Oh, I'm strapped for cash. I need 10,000. Hey, I love you. You're my friend, but I don't have 10,000. Besides, my wife will kill me. You can't give something that you don't have. So Lord Brahma said, I can't give you him. And now Prabhupada proves his point, because that's the key of preaching. You can't just say blah, 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 blah. You have to prove. So what does Prabhupada do? Quotes Bhagavad Gita. Brahma bhuvana loka punar avartino arjuna mam upetya tu kaunteya puna janmana vidyate. Brahma lives a long time, but that does not mean he is immortal. And he lives for millions of earth years, millions and millions, but he has to one day die. What to speak of Indra, Chandra, all of them. Hiranya means gold, and Kashipu means soft bed. This cunning gentleman, Hiranyakashipu, was interested in these two things: money, women. Reminds me of a president. I wonder who that could be. A certain president. Money and Hiranyakashipu wanted to enjoy them by becoming immortal. He asked from Lord Brahma many benedictions in hopes of indirectly fulfilling his desire to become immortal. But since Brahma told Hiranyakashipu that he could not grant the gift of immortality, Hiranyakashipu requested that he may not be killed by any man, animal, god, or any other living being within the 8,400,000 species. Hiranyakashipu also asked that he not die on land, in the air, or in water, or by any weapon. In this way, Hiranyakashipu foolishly thought these guarantees would save him from death. Ultimately, Brahma granted Hiranyakashipu all these benedictions, but Hiranyakashipu was killed by the personality of God in the form of, what's his name? What's his name? What's his name? That means better. Yes, Nrsimha. The Lord's half man, half lion incarnation. And no weapon was used to kill him, for he killed him by what? His fingernails. Nor was Hiranyakashipu killed on the land, in the air, or in the water. Where was he killed? On the lap. Nrsimha was beyond Hiranyakashipu's conception. To be continued. It's time for a commercial break. Everybody chant Hare Krishna. Here, no, that goes over there. So here's what's happening now, boys and girls. I'm going to finish this purport. For those who came a little later, those who were here in the beginning, we heard something from Srila Prabhupada's Sri Ishopanishad. We were hearing verse number 11, and we started the purport. So I want to finish that purport. After I finish this purport, Meenakshi Vrajarani Devi Dasi will lead us in the kirtan, and we'll have the arti. Then after the kirtan and arti, Nrsimha prayers, the special Nrsimha prayers. And I'm going to do one song on the guitar that Om has requested. Then we have a few announcements. And then we're going to honor Krishna Prasad. And then after that, Bhangra, is that right? After Prasad? Huh? Is that on the schedule? Krishna Bhangra? All right. So please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is a continuation of Prabhupada's purport. Please try to hear with rapt attention. Don't look at your cell phones. Listen to Prabhupada instead. It's only a few minutes. The cell phone can wait. Like they say, don't text and drive, right? Don't come to Namahat and text. Come to Namahat, leave the cell phone off. Right, Kamlesh? Yes. Prabhupada says, Sri Ishopanishad instructs us not to make one-sided attempts to win the struggle for existence. Everyone is struggling hard for existence, but the laws of material nature are so hard and fast that they do not allow anyone to surpass them. In order to attain a permanent life, one must be prepared to go back home, back to Godhead. The process by which one goes back to Godhead is a different branch of knowledge, and it has to be learned from revealed Vedic scriptures, such as the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. To become happy in this life and attain a permanent blissful life after leaving this material body, one must study this sacred literature and obtain transcendental knowledge. The conditioned living being has forgotten his or her eternal relationship with God and has mistakenly accepted this temporary place of one's birth as all in all. The Lord has kindly delivered the above-mentioned scriptures in India and other scriptures in other countries to remind the forgetful human being that one's home is not here in this material world. The living being is a spiritual entity, and he or she can be happy only by returning to to one's spiritual home. From his kingdom, the personality of Godhead sends his bona fide servants to propagate this message by which one can return to Godhead. And sometimes the Lord comes himself to do this very work. Since all living beings are his beloved sons and daughters, his parts and parcels, God is more sorry than we ourselves to see the sufferings we are constantly undergoing in this material condition. The miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with dead matter. Intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and engage themselves in the culture of vidya, or transcendental knowledge. Human life is the best opportunity for the culture of spiritual knowledge, and a human being who does not take advantage of this opportunity is called Naradama, the lowest of human beings. The path of avidya, or the advancement of material knowledge for sense gratification, is the path of repeated birth and death. As one exists spiritually, the living entity itself has no birth or death. Birth and death apply to the outward covering of the spirit soul, the body. Death is compared to the taking off, and birth to the putting on of outward garments. Foolish human beings who are grossly absorbed in the culture of nescience do not mind this cruel process. Enamored with the beauty of the illusory energy, they undergo the same miseries repeatedly and do not learn any lessons from the laws of nature. Therefore, the culture of transcendental knowledge is essential for the human being. Sense enjoyment is the diseased material condition, and it must be restricted as far as possible. Unrestricted sense enjoyment in this bodily condition is the path of ignorance and death. The living entities are not without spiritual senses. Every living being in one's original spiritual form has all the senses which are now materially manifested, but they are covered by the material body and mind. The activities of the material senses are perverted reflections of the activities of the original spiritual senses. In one's diseased condition, the spirit soul engages in material activities under the material covering. But real sense enjoyment is possible only when the disease of materialism is removed. In our pure spiritual form, free from all material contamination, real enjoyment of the senses is possible. Just as a patient must regain his or her health before one can truly enjoy sense pleasure again. Thus, the aim of human life should not be to enjoy perverted sense enjoyment, but to cure the material disease. Aggravation of the material disease is no sign of knowledge, but rather a sign of avidya, or ignorance. Now, for those who weren't here in the beginning, I explained that there's a certain class of people, they deny global warming. But I have put on my Facebook page 2 references from Bhagavatam and from this Ishopanishad to prove there is global warming. Here it is. Listen carefully. A patient must regain his or her health before one can truly enjoy sense pleasure. For good health, a person should not increase his or her fever from 105 to 107, because 107 means death, you're gone, bye. But one should reduce one's temperature to the normal 98.6. That should be the aim of human life. But the modern trend of material civilization is to increase the temperature of the feverish material condition, which has now reached the point of 107 degrees in the form of atomic energy. And you've all been looking in the papers. We're this close to war with you-know-what. North Korea, right? You've been reading? We're this close. And we got somebody, not going to mention a name, not too sharp in the mind. And the other guy, the other knucklehead in Korea, not any better. So, both have nukes, right? So what Prabhupada wrote this in the 50s. Before coming to America, he wrote this in the 50s. He could see what was going to happen now. So he's making an analogy. There's so much materialism now. It's at the point, like he says, 107 degrees. Meanwhile, the foolish politicians are crying that at any moment the world may go to hell. That is the result of the advancement of material knowledge and neglect of this most important part of life, the culture of spiritual knowledge. Sri Ishopanishad herein warns that we must not follow this dangerous path leading to death. On the contrary, we must develop the culture of spiritual knowledge so that we may become completely free from the cruel hands of death. This does not mean that all activities for the maintenance of the body should be stopped. There is no question of stopping activities, just as there's no question of wiping out one's temperature altogether. To make the best use of a bad bargain is the appropriate expression. The culture of spiritual knowledge necessitates the help of the body and mind. Therefore, maintenance of the body and mind is required if we are to reach our goal. The normal temperature should be maintained at 98.6, and the great sages and saints of India have attempted to do this by a balanced program of spiritual and material knowledge. They never allowed the misuse of human intelligence for diseased sense gratification. So, you students, please keep this in mind. You're going to high school, university, postgraduate. You're learning so much material knowledge. It's okay, but balance. Prabhupada mentioned balanced program. So what's that balanced program? Culture of spiritual knowledge. Where do you get spiritual knowledge? Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Ishopanishad, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna book. These are not books you read once and then, okay. No, these are meant to be read daily. Balance. You're studying to become lawyers, engineers, doctors, computer geeks. All right? That requires lots of intense endeavor, but don't think that that's enough. No. Equal balanced time for hearing and chanting. Everybody chant the Maha Mantra. If all you do is material activities, you will have a personal global warming in your mind and heart. You will feel it. That's why we have this expression, I'm fried. Yes, that's called personal global warming. It comes from overindulgence in materialistic activities. Balance. Like we used to say in my generation, cool, man. You have to be cool. All right? So how do you become cool? Chanting, reading, you sang the song. Sravana, Kirtana, Smarana, the 9 processes. This is not something you do just once a week. Once a week, do you eat once a week? Oh, Prabhu, I just need to eat once. No. You eat every day. The soul also needs to be fed every day. Don't fast. The soul does not fast. Fasting is good for the body. No problem. The soul should never fast. The soul should be intoxicated. Filled up to here. The soul. How do you fill up? Reading Gita, chanting Maha Mantra, take prasadam is also both good for the body. Like they say, does a body good? Prasad. So make sure you're taking prasad every day. Make sure you're chanting on the mala every day. Studying Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. 7 días, 7 days a week. That's the balance. When you have your families, doesn't change. It starts now. It starts right now. No excuse. Don't become a global warming, what is that word? Victim. Don't fry out. Cool down by nice everyday hearing and chanting. Everybody chant the Maha Mantra. Let's finish Prabhupada's purport. Human activities diseased by a tendency towards sense gratification have been regulated in the Vedas under the principles of salvation. This system employs religion, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. But at the present moment, people have very little interest in salvation. Most people have only one game in life, sense gratification. And in order to achieve this end, they make plans for economic development. Misguided men think that religion should be maintained because it contributes to economic development, which is required for sense gratification. Thus, in order to guarantee further sense gratification after death in heaven, there is some system of religious observance. But this is not the purpose of religion. The purpose of religion is self-realization. Economic development is required just to maintain the body in a sound, healthy condition. A man, a woman should lead a healthy life with a sound mind just to realize vidya, true knowledge, which is the aim of human life. Now, again, you youngsters, okay? You're graduating, you're about to enter the real world. This is for you. This life is not meant for working like an ass, for culturing ignorance just for sense gratification. The path of knowledge is most perfectly presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, which directs a human being to utilize one's life to inquire into the absolute truth. The absolute truth is realized step by step as Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. The absolute truth is realized by the broad-minded human who has attained knowledge and detachment by following the 18 principles of knowledge described in chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 through 12. These 18 principles winds up in the path of transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead, Sri. See, it took you 3 times. I heard Meenakshi. Okay? Therefore, all classes of men are encouraged to learn the art of devotional service to the Lord. All classes. So, doctor class, engineer class, worker class, woman, nobody is excused. It's not a Hindu thing. No, it's a human thing. It's for everybody. Everybody should learn this devotional service. Finishing up, the guaranteed path to the aim of Vidya is described by Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we have presented in English as Nectar of Devotion. The culture of Vidya is also summarized in Srimad Bhagavatam in the following words. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly, key that word, constantly, not just on Sunday, constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. How often? Constantly. What? How often? I want to hear everybody say that. Thank you. Krishna heard that in your heart. So he's going to remind you. Hello? Constantly. Unless religion, economic development, and sense gratification are aimed toward the attainment of devotional service to the Lord, they are simply different forms of nescience, as Sri Ishopanishad indicates in the following mantras. Thank you for listening to Prabhupada's purport. Everybody chant the Maha Mantra.